4, Environment and Natural Resources, Complaints, Inspections, and Enforcement, Information, Maintenance, and Reporting. This bill has been on the voting list at least once before. It establishes various tracking and reporting requirements for the Maryland Department of the Environment and the Department of Natural Resources with respect to enforcement of environmental and natural resources laws. Among other things, the Department of the Environment must maintain specified complaint data and develop and maintain a website with specified information and data relating to the enforcement of environmental laws. The Department of Natural Resources must submit an annual report with specified data regarding the enforcement of natural resources and conservation laws. There are amendments in your packet. These are the same amendments that were discussed at a previous voting session on page 8 from Senator Elfreth. The amendments limit the application of the bill's provisions dealing with the Department of the Environment to the following programs tracked through the department's environmental tracking system or a comparable database. 1, beginning October 1st, 2021, water quality programs within the department's Water and Science Administration. And 2, beginning June 30th, 2022, water quality programs within the department's Land and Materials Administration and air quality programs within the department's Air Radiation Administration. The amendments also change references to suspected violations and instead refer to alleged violations, and strike language requiring the department to post information on proposed legal settlements and instead require the department to post information on finalized legal settlements. The amendments strike language referencing any other elevated status of concern and provisions requiring the department to create a list of violations the department has deemed significant noncompliance, and it makes conforming and clarifying changes throughout.
Okay, we may have moved this before, but let's, is there a motion? Is there a second? My understanding, the amendments are more make it more palatable to the agency?
Both to the agency and to the regulated community, yes.
Any objection to the amendments?
I know we talked about this last time. So, April, are these the same amendments we talked about last time, or did they update the amendments?
Last time.
Okay. One of the issues that came up is, with MDE, they were talking about alleged violation. And so I went back to the department and asked about somebody coming in anonymous, and then also, would there be enough information if a PIA was given? Could they find out who that was? So they came back and said if a person was anonymously put in there, they would not release that information. They probably wouldn't even store that information. But on the other part, they said they could basically tie that case number and identify the location and probably the organization or facility. And that was my concern with it is, and I know we've talked about this on numerous things, but simply have an allegation against you opposed to an actual violation and having that public, where somebody could say, you know, Company A is polluting our creeks and they're bad people, and then they come back later and find out they never did it, and can you ever get that information back where they ruin their reputation? So I don't know if there's some way we can put in there that they can't give out identifying information even though they have the case, unless it's, I don't know, that's just my concern with it.
If I could, as I recall, if the complainant wants to check to see what happened with the investigation and the results, they should be able to see. In other words, have a tracking number that they have in front of them. The public doesn't have that tracking number, and they can only see the case, the type of case, air, water, whatever, and then see if there's an investigation and if it was sustained or unsustained, I believe. Ms. Morton, is that correct, or correct me?
Right. So the idea that tracking, like a case number, would be posted on the website, is my understanding. But I think his concern is if somebody wanted to dig deeper and then contact the department with that tracking number and try to figure out what, which specific facility it's related to. I mean, arguably they could do it now if they knew that a complaint had been made. It just is a few more hoops to jump through.
A person who puts in says there's an allegation. I thought they could currently now call MDE and say, look, I put this complaint in, I want to find out what the status is, and they still could find out. But this bill goes a step further and says, not only that, we want to make it more public to other people, and we're going to put it on a website and put a case number up there where the public could then reverse engineer it, as it were, and find out who it was about. So that's...
I'm not sure they're going to be able to figure out exactly who it was. I don't think they're mentioning the complainant or the business or operation. Look, if someone works hard enough, they might be able to find stuff out. I think part of the reason for the bill is to track, are things being investigated, are the claims being found out to be legitimate or not, and rather than have the PIA, every complaint, every enforcement action, why not be able to get to a website? I think.
And I agree with that. Okay. Last thing I'll just say is, can we tighten that up a little? Because you're saying it's just going to be air or water.
I was speaking generically. Could be other things. I don't know the categories.
Yeah, and that's what I was... Could we tighten that up so it doesn't give identifying information on the web, or...
Very specific about what is allowed to go on the website. The only thing that's allowed to go on the website is the date on which the complaint was submitted, the county of the alleged violation occurred, which administration within the department is authorized to enforce, any complaint or case identification number, and if a complaint has been closed, the date on which the complaint was closed. That's the only information regarding the alleged violations that goes on the website.
And Senator, when I said air and water, I was assuming the departments. When it talks about administration within the department is authorized to enforce the alleged violation, I'm sure there are 12 other categories. There are multiple departments or multiple, units inside the agency. Move. It's been in front of us before. So the bill is amended. Senator Carrozza.
Thank you. And I think, April, you might have just answered it, but I want to make sure. If you're saying...
Senator, bring the mic closer, please.
Sorry. April, you may have addressed this. There was some concerns outlined in the Delmarva Chicken Association about protecting family farmers, especially if for some reason that a general permit might have expired due to no fault of their own. But is your response now that their identity would not be on that website, so that would no longer be a concern? I just want to make sure I understand that. And the concern here is that so these farm families are not targeted.
Right, and so the amendments deal with that concern. So that's on, if you look on page 17 of the voting packet, there is language in the bill that talked about a list of expired and administratively continued environmental permits. So that actually, sorry, so the short answer, the amendments don't necessarily address that concern. Sorry, I was reading that in relation to something else. But it would require the department to list expired and administratively continued permits on its website. That's a general requirement.
With or without the identity on the website?
It is the name of the permittee. So yes, the name of the permittee does go on there.
So the name of the permit, so it doesn't really address the question that if for some reason that permit expired at no fault of his or her own thought, that it would still be showing up as
That's correct. It would still be on the website.
with no explanation.
I mean, right. So it would include information on the status of the permit renewal process, but yes, the idea there is all expired and administratively continued permits, regardless of the reason.
Okay, the bill as amended is before us. Let's do a roll call, please. It's favorable as amended.
Senator Kagan? Aye. Senator Lamb? Yes. Senator Hester? Yes. Senator Ellis?
Yes.
Senator Gallion?
No.
Senator Perosa? No. Senator Washington? Yes. Senator Riley?
No.
Senator Patterson? Yes. Senator Simonaire?
No.
And Senator Penske?
Yes.
7-4.
Okay, for the public, that passed 7-4. We're now going to go back to SB 4, Senator Edwards. And we also have Ms. Daly here to answer any questions, and Mr. Jake.
Senate Bill 4, Maryland Public Ethics Law, Retaliation for Reporting or Participating in Investigation Prohibition. This bill prohibits an official or employee from retaliating against an individual for reporting or participating in an investigation of a potential violation of the Maryland Public Ethics Law. There is one amendment. It's on page 3 of your voting packet. This is actually from Senator Ferguson, even though it says leave blank. It said, prohibits an official or an employee from knowingly accepting a gift from an association or an entity acting on behalf of an association that is engaged in representing counties or municipal corporations. It also amends the title to reflect this change.
Let's get it on the floor before us first. Is there a motion? It's been moved and seconded. Would someone like to move the amendment to get that in front of us as well? It's been moved. Is there a second? It's been seconded. Okay, the bill and the amendment are before you. It's been explained. Ms. Daly or Mr. Wiseman, do you want to talk about it or explain?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jake Weissman, Office of Senate President. Just to explain, we discovered that the organizations that represent counties and municipalities don't have to follow the gift and meal limits and rules that currently exist for other lobbying organizations, and just wanted to make sure we caught them as well. That's the purpose of the amendment.
Questions on the amendment? Senator Cruz, is that a reflection or is your light on? Do you wish to speak? Did you wish to speak, Senator? You don't have to.
Thank
I'm
you,
not
Mr.
pushing
Chair.
you into the Senator Cruz followed by
I
Senator
did have a
Ellis.
question, and just when we were working on the one bill, then this amendment came in today. As I understand it, just came in. I'm trying to understand what prompted the amendment at this time.
Sure. Thank you, Senator. So back before session, we received requests, and Ms. Daly received requests from different lobbying organizations about different events that they wanted to try to figure out how to do during session. And they were unable to do so because of the rules when it comes to meal prohibitions and needing to, and Dia, correct me if my language is wrong, consume the food in front of the sponsor. We received a notice, and I'm happy to share with you, that there was a happy hour put on by an organization that was delivering food and drink to senators and delegates, which took us by surprise because we had prohibited that from other outside organizations. And so that was what flagged for us that there was this kind of loophole that we want to fix.
Thank you. Senator Ellis, you had a question or a comment?
I have a question. So beyond this, I love this bill and the amendment. My question is on definition of legislative unit. So on page 5 of the reprint, paragraph 2 talks about for officials of legislative branch, food or beverages received and consumed by the official in the presence of the donor or sponsoring entity as part of a meal or reception to which all members of a legislative unit were invited. So what is a legislative unit?
Ms. Daly, you want to answer that?
Yes, so legislative unit is actually defined in the ethics law to include, it to mean the General Assembly, either house of the General Assembly, a standing committee of the General Assembly, or a county or regional delegation of members of the General Assembly.
Okay, so recognize caucuses in the General Assembly. Is that particularly considered a legislative
Caucuses
unit?
are not legislative units.
Okay. Thank you.
Questions on the Senator, Madam Vice Chair?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, two questions, I think one for Ms. Daly and one for Mr. Weissman. Ms. Daly, if there's a lobbyist that violates a provision of the ethics law and spends too much or buys a gift that's too expensive or sends a gift that when they're not in the presence of the legislator, what happens to that lobbyist?
So this, just to be clear, this provision is talking about
Correct.
what you as legislators may accept. A lobbyist is prohibited from giving a gift that they know the official or employee is not permitted to accept. There are various options available for the Ethics Commission. Sometimes the Ethics Commission will negotiate a settlement. Sometimes the official will repay the lobbyist for the improper gift. And, as I've told all of you, a gift isn't a gift if you pay for it. For a severe issue, an ongoing issue, the Ethics Commission may reprimand a lobbyist, can censure a lobbyist. For really bad stuff, they can revoke a lobbyist's ability to lobby. They can impose fines. If you were bored one evening and went to the Ethics Commission's webpage, you can see all of those public orders related to lobbyists, including some gift violations.
Okay, thank you. And so first off, if a legislator isn't allowed to accept something, if a lobbyist can't give a gift that a legislator can't legally accept, it's on the lobbyist, but the legislator can repay or otherwise make right by it. Was there any conversation about this virtual happy hour legislator people given the option of repaying?
So the lobbyists who reached out to me had asked if they could have these virtual events. And the law says that the meals and beverages have to be consumed in the presence of the donor. So I advised them that would be improper. But certainly if there were a situation where, if I'm a lobbyist, you and I go out to dinner, you pay for your meal, I pay for my meal, there is no gift.
One more
There.
question for you before I shift it to Mr. Weissman. So now that it's in the presence of, would Zoom or virtual stuff count? If we were each eating dinner and you paid for my dinner, but we were in the presence and in a Zoom room together during the time that we were eating?
I can tell you that the Ethics Commission has considered that issue, and they've said that virtual meetings are not in the presence of. I would not be comfortable saying that a legislator could accept have a meal delivered to their home and consume it while we're both on camera. I'm not comfortable saying that that's in the presence of a donor.
Okay.
I'd have to talk to the Ethics Committee about that.
Sure.
And I don't think I could advise them that that would be permissible.
Sure. This is just a new day. I mean, all the rules and all the all the old habits are dying a little bit hard, and I think lobbyists and advocates in general are trying to think outside the box as to how to reach us and how to contact us. And so kind of you can't blame them for trying, but they need to be trying within the parameters. So my question for Mr. Weissman, since we are specifically talking about two entities, that which represents the 157 cities and towns, and that which represents the 24 counties. What happens when they do their annual conferences and invite all of us? Would that be okay because it's all, even if not all of us attend, but everyone's invited to attend? Or what if just those who speak attend? Can you just speak to that? Because that's a really important...
Senator, I'd like to, if possible, defer to
Sure.
Ms. Daly.
Did you hear the question?
Jake, I hope you
Dia,
heard.
did you hear the question from the Vice Chair?
So the question is, can Mako and MML invite you to their conferences?
Yes.
Certainly, as long as they are inviting, they're inviting all elected officials in the state. If you're a scheduled speaker, there is an exception that allows these entities to pay for your travel, your lodging, reasonable travel and lodging, to pay for meals associated with the speaking engagement. That's certainly permissible, just like if the Maryland Association of Realtors were to ask you to come speak at their annual conference.
And nothing about that would change in this bill with this amendment, correct?
Correct. Basically, this would hold them to the same gift standards as applied to not only lobbyists, but also to entities that do business with the General Assembly. For example, the hotels where you guys all stay during session, just like a hotel couldn't say, hey, if you stay here, we'll pay for you to have a trip to Ireland next year. Their gifts have to comply with the same rules, just like an entity, like a business that is substantially regulated by the General Assembly. Their gifts are going to be restricted as well.
Thank you, Ms. Daly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. On the amendment, will anybody be voting against the amendment? Okay, the amendment's adopted. The bill as amended.
I'd like to be on the record against the amendment.
Okay, it's 10-1 in favor of the adopting the amendment. The bill as amended, discussion. Will anybody be voting against it? Seeing none, it'll be voted as unanimous and taken to the floor. Next bill. Thank you. Mr. Weissman and Ms. Daly. I don't know if she...
She's staying for another bill. There's another bill on here
Okay.
that she's hanging out. All right. Senate Bill 340. Thank you, Jake. Senate Bill 340. Election law, offenses related to voting, penalties. This bill establishes that an individual is not qualified to be a registered voter and is ineligible to vote if 1, the individual has been convicted of willfully and knowingly voting or attempting to vote more than once in an election, and 2, less than 4 years have elapsed since the date of the conviction. There are no amendments, and there was opposition at the hearing.
Is there a motion? Senator Washington first.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded unfavorable. Discussion on the bill. Senator Gallion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is pretty simple, straightforward bill. Our elections are very important, and there should be consequences for folks that do the wrong thing and that would try to either vote multiple times or personate somebody or whatever. While researching this bill, there was options we could have put in. Right now, it's a misdemeanor. I think it's like $5,000 fine and up to 5 years in prison. I didn't go the route of making it a felony, which would have, if it was a felony and you were convicted, you would have lost your right to vote for a time until your out of prison anyway. So this seemed like a moderate thing, a deterrent for folks who may want to do the wrong thing. Just simply says, hey, if you do this and you're convicted, you're going to lose this right for 4 years. So it didn't seem like a really big stretch to me. So I would discourage the unfavorable and hope the committee would, approve this bill. Thank you.
Senator Washington, followed by Senator Cardoza.
Thank you, Chairman. And again, I respect the desire to uphold our system and the validity of the system. But unfortunately, there just continues to be these types of bills. And I just think taking away the franchise is an extreme. As the bill sponsor said, there are already penalties for voting, for violating this rule. And so to take away the franchise, I think is too far. So that's why I'm voting against this bill.
Senator Cardoza.
I just want to understand the bill. It says, would the individual has to have been convicted of willfully and knowingly voting or attempting to vote more than once? But they would have had to been convicted of that for what? For the higher penalty? Which is going from what to what?
Ms. Goodman.
So the penalty in law for this currently is, you see in lines 26 through 28, and that means they're guilty of a misdemeanor, and on conviction is subject to a fine of not more than $5,000 or imprisonment for not more than 5 years. So the penalty in this now also means that they lose the franchise for the next 4 years. That's the escalation of penalty.
For 4 years, not permanently.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, roll call, please.
Senator Kagan.
This is yes on the unfavorable.
Mm-hmm. Senator Lamb.
Yes.
Senator Hester. Yes. Senator Ellis.
Yes.
Senator Gallion. Senator Cardoza.
No.
Senator Washington.
Yes.
Senator Riley.
No.
Senator Patterson.
Yes.
Senator Simonaire. And Senator Penske.
Yes.
7-4.
The unfavorable is passed 7-4. Next bill.
Senate Bill 374, Campaign Finance, Special Session of the General Assembly, Contributions Prohibited. This bill prohibits specified campaign finance activity, including receiving or soliciting contributions during a special session of the General Assembly by or on behalf of the Governor, Lieutenant Governor, Attorney General, Comptroller, and members of the General Assembly, subject to specified exceptions. The campaign finance entity of an official in violation of the prohibition is subject to a specified civil penalty. There is one amendment. It's on page 21 of your voting packet. And this amendment would essentially conform the bill to current practice. So it prohibits a legislator or agent of the legislator as a candidate for federal, state, or local office, or the campaign finance entity of the candidate, from during a special session to receive contributions, conducting a fundraising event, selling or soliciting a ticket for a fundraising event, or depositing or using a contribution received but not deposited before the special session. It authorizes a fundraising event organized or scheduled before the announcement of the special session to continue, prohibits a legislator from intentionally scheduling a fundraising event that coincides with a special session once the announcement of a special session has been made, and it makes the Joint Committee on Legislative Ethics administer of these provisions and not the State Board of Elections.
Is there a motion on the bill? Is there a motion on the bill?
No favorable.
Is there a second? Second. The amendment. As has been described, the amendment codifies the existing practice through the Ethics Committee. Anybody object to the amendment? Seeing not, the amendment is adopted. So the bill as amended is before you Discussion, debate, comments. Senator Washington.
I support the bill. I just have a question. It has to do with intentionally scheduling. So just say, for example, you had scheduled it ahead of time. What happened? So you already scheduled something. I mean, it's less relevant now, but say it, some fine day we are able to meet again. You've rented the hall. What happens? Just
Yeah, if you have expended money or sent out invitations already, you may continue. If you have not expended money, you cannot proceed with it. So if you've rented a hall, put deposit down, you may proceed. But short of that, you can't say, "Oh, I'm going to have a fundraiser," after notice has been given of the special session. Is that correct, Ms. Daly?
That's correct. Basically what the amendment does is it codifies Ethics Opinion 11. And what you described is exactly what has happened in the past as far as fundraising during special sessions.
okay, great. Thank you.
Further discussion. Senator Gallion?
So how would this relate to, say folks are kind of in the know and learn things a little earlier? If a certain legislator knew ahead of time that there most likely would be a special session, so they hurry up and schedule this thing, and then the next day it's announced, they could still have that event?
Ms. Daly?
I would say the Ethics Committee is going to look at the specific facts and circumstances, and a lot of that is going to depend on who the person is. We certainly are going to presume that the presiding officers know when a special session is going to be scheduled well before regular rank and file members. I can tell you the Ethics Committee is very thoughtful and thorough, and there are no secrets in Annapolis. So if that's what's happening, I think the Ethics Committee would become aware and address it.
Thank you.
The question's been raised, Ms. Daly. If someone sends out an email asking for solicitations, obviously you don't have to spend a lot of money to send a blast email to 20 or 50 or 100 people. Right now, the bill says or.
So what we have done in the past is if you have sent the invitations and not necessarily sent them snail mail, if you are doing evites, you're sending things electronically, if you have sent those invitations and then the next day the special session is announced, the committee isn't going to say you need to rescind those invitations because they've already gone out.
Okay. Senator Washington.
Just to clarify, so it seemed like we were talking about that there was the expenditure of funds. So if someone sent an email out, but they hadn't spent any money, it seems to me that there's a different thing. Or are you just saying, so in fact, it doesn't have anything to do with money. It sounds like it's the intention.
It's in the amendment, it's or.
Yeah, yeah. So I just think we need to. I guess I'm asking the committee. So, is it, if we're prohibiting this, is it the expenditure of funds? And to me, the argument is, it's difficult to undo it. But if I just sent out an email and I hadn't spent any money and I hadn't really done anything, then that's not difficult to undo. So I'm just asking us, what do we care more about? Was it that that the person spent money and it's difficult to undo? Or is it just, well, that's it. I really can't.
Vice Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Washington, Senator Gallion, I share some of the concerns. And while I'm okay with this going this way as is, the more I thought about it, the more it just feels like a huge loophole. I wonder there's a third aspect, which is temporal, which is the fundraiser is in 2 weeks versus 6 months. I think we've all had to cancel things, whether it's COVID or something else. We're really sorry. You sent a blast email. Sure would appreciate your contribution before we reconvene, but we're going to have to reschedule it for after the special session, which is happening in 3 months or something. I don't know, Dia, does that upset the apple cart? Because I think this is better than nothing, and I think it's fine. I just worry that there is too big a loophole. Going back to what Senator Gallion said, or not even expressing any ill intent, but just sending an email. I just think you could send a new email.
So I will say with the special sessions that have been that have happened since I assumed this role in 2012, we did not see a large number of members scheduling fundraising events. In fact, I can't recall a member who actually had a fundraising event scheduled to occur during a special session. You know, I think it's important to remember that special sessions typically are extremely short, so it's unlikely that you're going to have that many fundraisers that have already been scheduled for those couple days that a special session will happen.
You make a good point, Ms. Daly. I think this might be one of those half a loaf. This may not be the most perfect thing ever, but I think it's way better than not having any restrictions at all in the law. So if we haven't moved the amendment yet.
Yeah, and look, I think we've had, 3 or 4 special sessions the last 15 years. I mean, it's not like they're happening a lot. Senator?
Just a quick question. So this says this is codifying current practice, and you mentioned there's opinion on your webpage and so forth. So by enacting this, does this put different penalties because it's in law and it has default penalties versus how you handle it if it's an opinion?
So the Ethics Committee handles any violation of the standards of legislative ethics equally. So the ethics law allows the committee to establish some standards to expand on what this statutory language means through opinion. So the committee is going to impose the same type of penalty, follow the same process if the alleged violation is inconsistent with an opinion or inconsistent with a word in the statute. So I don't think it's going to change anything at all.
Okay. Did we adopt the amendment? Yeah, we adopt. The bill is amended. Will anybody be voting against it? Then we will pass it as 11-0 and send it to the floor. Is that it for Dia? Thank you, Ms. Daly. Thank you. Good seeing you.
Senate Bill 450, State Lakes Protection and Restoration Fund, Purpose, Use, and Funding Sunset Extension. This bill extends the termination date of Chapter 698 of 2018 from June 30th, 2022 to June 30th, 2027, which makes the changes made under Chapter 698 to provisions governing the State Lakes Protection and Restoration Fund, including the establishment of a mandated annual appropriation to the fund of $1 million applicable for an additional 5 years. There are no amendments.
I'll entertain a motion. It's been moved by Senator Riley, seconded. Discussion? Seeing none, will anybody be voting against this legislation? Seeing no hands or lights, we'll mark that as 11-0 and send it to the floor. Next.
Senate Bill 472, Baltimore City Alcoholic Beverages Districts Legislative Districting Plan References. This emergency bill alters specified statutory references to the boundaries of the Baltimore City's alcoholic beverages districts so that they are defined as coterminous with the legislative districts in the legislative districting plan of 2012, rather than based on any relationship to the legislating districting plan of 2002, as ordered by the Maryland Court of Appeals. The bill contains a grandfather clause requiring the Baltimore City Board of License Commissioners to exempt an activity made unlawful by the bill's change in reference to the district boundaries if the license holder received approval to conduct the activity on or before February 23, 2012, and has owned the licensed premises continuously since then. There is one amendment from Senator Washington on page 24 of your voting packet, and this amendment removes specific references to the 47th Alcoholic Beverages District from the bill. There was no opposition, and there is a local letter.
Is there a motion? Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. Discussion. As many people know, the 47th is no longer in Baltimore City. It is in Prince George's County. Okay, seeing no discussion, no debate, will anybody be voting against this bill? Seeing no lights or comments, that'll be marked as 11-0, and we have the letter. Next.
Okay. Senate Bill 525, Baltimore City Centralized Booking Facility, Voting Information and Early Voting Polling Places. This bill requires the Baltimore City Centralized Booking Facility to disseminate voting information and voter registration materials to eligible voters in the facility before each election. The bill also requires the local Board of Elections for Baltimore City to establish an early voting polling place at the Baltimore City Centralized Booking Facility for the use of only eligible voters in the facility, which must be opened on the same days and for the same hours as an early voting center. There are two amendments. The first is from Senator McCray, and it's on page 25 of your voting packet, and there's a reprint starting on page 30. So Senator McCray's amendment removes the provisions requiring the dissemination of voting information and registration materials and the establishment of the early voting center. It requires the facility to provide a ballot drop box from the State Board of Elections to the eligible voters in the facility to submit election-related materials, to monitor the drop box, and to disseminate written notifications directly to the eligible voters on the use of the drop box. Further, the amendment says the State Board must provide the drop box to the facility and guidance on the use and fulfillment of the requirements of this section. It must also adopt regulations in collaboration with the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services on specified provisions. The local Board of Elections of Baltimore City must provide staff to collect the materials from the drop box and to distribute the collected materials to the appropriate entities in a timely manner. Further, the State Board of Elections is required to submit a report to specified committees by January 1st of each year on the materials collected. There is also an additional amendment on page, 25. And this one would change the reporting requirement to require the local Board of Elections of Baltimore City to submit the report, since it's the entity collecting and distributing the materials versus the State Board, which isn't kind of touching them.
Okay, first, let's get the bill on the floor. It's been moved. It's been seconded. The first McCray amendment, cutting to the chase, it moves it from an early voting center to putting a drop box. He's backtracked a number of degrees, which I appreciate a lot. So that's the basic purpose of his first amendment. Senator.
Mr. Chairman, got a phone call on this bill. So the question is, will someone from the Board of Elections be required to go into the facility to collect the ballots?
So a staff member from the local Board of Elections will be charged with coming in and collecting the materials from the drop box.
The comment from the administration of the prison was that it's a duplication of a current process, and it is presented in this manner. If absentee ballots were given to the people who are in the facility, and they filled out their ballots, it can just be carried to the mailroom and mailed directly to the Board of Elections. There would not be a need for an outside person to come and to handle ballots. So it was, in a sense, thanks to Senator Kagan's great bill a few years ago, that there's no postage required. If the absentee ballot shows up, it's filled out, it's given to the staff and handled in a manner just like every other piece of outgoing mail and sent directly to the Board of Elections. The establishment of a drop box, the admission of an outside person, the supervision of the drop box by staff, they indicate it could be distracting from their primary responsibilities. They were very hesitant to find a way to amend this bill to make it acceptable when the current procedures are sufficient that every vote gets counted. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I just wanted to make.
Ms. Goodman, and then I'll go to Senator Washington.
I just want to make one point. So only ballots aren't the only thing collected in a drop box. It's also other election-related materials that may not be prepaid postage for those materials. Voter registration applications or notifications for other, change in registration for your party affiliation. Any of those things can be put in there. Doesn't necessarily have to be an absentee ballot that goes into the drop box.
Does the proposed bill and amendment say how soon before an election a drop box has to be prepared?
Time to allow them to register to vote or to provide a vote. Yeah, just insufficient time for them to be able to give the materials to the proper entity for them to accomplish the goal. For example, if they want to change a party affiliation, the drop box and those materials would have to be provided in the appropriate time for a person in the facility to accomplish that.
Sure, that wasn't covered in our conversation. Thank you very much for bringing that to our attention.
You're welcome.
It sounds like the senator has some clarity on this, but I would say that this is the point of the bill, is to sort of normalize and the interaction of these eligible voters with the voting process, and to not have it mediated by the Department of Corrections. And so just as any of us would have the expectation that our votes could be taken in a ballot box, or we could choose to vote in person. They don't have the option to vote in person, but the idea is that we're not relying on the mails, which also we know that that's been very problematic. We're not relying on a correctional officer who has lots of things to do, or a social worker lots of things to do, to also act as an electioneer. And again, the bill is significantly tailored back, so I think that it's making a statement. And also, I do think some of the processes that the board, that the Department of Correction is doing, that's might not be something that they should be doing. And if we could start to partner with them, I think that would be a good thing. So that's why I would ask for the body to support the bill, particularly as it's amended. I think it's much more manageable and doable, and moves us along.
There's also an amendment to the amendment to say that it's the local board and not the state board, correct? That's a correction. Anybody have an objection to that?
Are we talking about on page, sorry. Stacey, are we talking about on page 33, pages 3 of 5 at the top, lines 1 through 3? Because that was one of my questions.
Page 37.
Nope. Okay, so then I have another question.
So page 37, I apologize for giving you the wrong page. That is the amendment that would essentially amend the reporting requirement. So instead of the state board providing this report, the local board of Baltimore City would provide that report.
Where would that be, Stacey? Oh, that's on top of page 34.
on 29, isn't it?
On or before January 1st of each year, the state board shall submit a report?
So if you're looking at the reprint,
Yes.
it's on page 34.
Yes.
If you're looking at the amendment, it's on page 29.
Okay. So, Mr. Chairman, I have questions? So I actually, thank you, Stacy. Top of page 33 of the reprint, bill page 3 of 5, lines 1 through 3, State Board of Elections shall provide the Baltimore City, booking facility with the Dropbox. As we know, currently, and in my bill, to clarify it, right now that's a 50-50 split. I just want to clarify that language looks like SBE, the State Board of Elections, rather than the city, would be paying for 100% of that cost. Is that the intent? Which seems okay, because residents of the booking facility could be from around the state. So, but I just want to make sure we know that that's what we look like we're doing.
Well, it says the State Board of Elections.
So that would mean, though, the state would pay for it.
It says the state board shall provide the Dropbox.
Okay.
I mean, I did not speak with Senator McCray about the intent of the delegation as to who shall pay the cost of that, but, so the state board is charged with certain things, and they are charged with providing the Dropbox and the written notification of materials to disseminate. The local board is charged with providing staff to pick up the
Right.
materials and then also disseminating to the correct other local boards for inmates in the facility who are not from the Baltimore City area.
So I think we ought to clarify that as to how that's going to work. Senator Riley was asking about access to the drop-off box. Could you say again, could someone is this location going to be posted on the website of all drop-off box locations? No. So this would be the one private one. Oh, the chairman is not happy. I'm sorry.
I just don't want to complicate this more than it needs to be.
All right,
That's all.
well, the one other question that I had is going back to page 34, disaggregated by each weekly collection from the Dropbox. I am worried that as we get close in election season, that a weekly pickup may be insufficient to make sure that the ballots are collected and deposited in a timely manner so that the ballots are counted. That's under D at the top of page 34 of the reprint.
It's not saying the frequency of the pickup. It's aggregated report.
I understand the report. It says disaggregated by each weekly collection from the Dropbox, and then it's how many absentee ballots, how many this, that, and the other, but it's from each weekly collection.
Right. There could be a daily collection, and that week gets aggregated and it reported by week. I don't think this speaks to the frequency of collections.
So on page 33, if you look on page 33, there's no line numbers, but if you see at the bottom, it says, and then there's a 1 and a 2, and it says the local board of elections for Baltimore City shall provide staff to collect election-related materials submitted to the box drop on a weekly basis.
Right.
And the drop box after an election-related deadline. So, but they're charged not only with collecting the materials, but disseminating it. The only change to the report was because the state board doesn't come in and collect the materials, so the local board would have to send the state board something that talked about all the materials they collected. It didn't seem to line up with the way that the bill was actually functioning. That was why there was a change to the reporting requirement.
So
But nothing says that they can't come in more frequently. It just, on a weekly basis, is the required staffing.
Understood. But it seems to me that if we're setting the floor, that the floor can be the ceiling too. And if someone has an application that's pending, or a request for an absentee that's pending, or a ballot that's pending, a once-a-week pickup could miss deadlines. And if the whole goal is to help these folks vote, it seems to me like we're not necessarily going to be helping these people vote. I have one last question, then I will turn off my mic.
Senator, but on that, it says a drop box after an election-related deadline. So if there's a deadline, they have to come back after the deadline. Is that right?
The goal here is definitely to make sure that the box is put in and sufficient time for the individuals in the facility to be able to participate in the election. I also think that the officials at the local board, they as they have said in many of your hearings today, that they're very good at doing this, that they do this all the time. And I'm assuming that part of their responsibility is to make sure if they have a drop box, to make sure the individuals who are using the drop box have their materials processed in the manner that allows them to participate. I'm not sure how explicit you want to be in the law that requires them. I mean, that's up to you. It's a policy decision of this committee to decide how explicit you want to be in the law. And in this case, it says at least weekly. I mean, otherwise, if they're not doing that, then that's on the local board that they have disenfranchised these individuals who the whole intent of the bill is to give them an opportunity to participate in the electoral process.
Okay, just to be clear, it doesn't say at least weekly. It says weekly, on a weekly basis. So I want to be precise, and I think if it says weekly, then we have to assume that it's weekly. So the other, one more thing.
Do you want to propose at least?
A minimum of weekly, but I think it ought to be more frequent as it gets closer to deadlines. It doesn't say that either. You want me to just work on this offline? I'm happy to work with Senator McRae and Ms. Goodman.
I'd like to do what needs to be done and move the bill, basically. I mean, but Senator Washington?
I appreciate what you're saying, Senator, but do we tell any other local boards how often they have to pick up the and maybe we should, but I'm just wondering, do we do that? Do we tell any of the other? Do we have rules about how often boxes need to be emptied?
I can tell you that they're bipartisan teams. I want to say that during early voting and stuff, because in most places, and if this is not going to be a public drop box, I think the rules may look different for a place that's not a public drop box. Right. But other places, bipartisan teams, I think it's twice a day. I don't know if that's in law, but I think that was in practice because otherwise they were getting full. And then they were under police escort and delivered to the local boards of elections.
Right.
Like, it was a thing, for sure.
So I guess I was trying to say, like, the way so we can move it along, that maybe it's just in accordance with other practices. I mean, it just seems
But that
like
may be totally unreasonable and a waste of staff time, because what if there are 4 applications in there?
right.
So I think we'd have to figure this out. I don't know, and I don't want to come back and fix it again in 2 years or something.
Well,
Can we
could-
leave it to the Baltimore City Board of Elections based on demand, based on usage, to determine the time frame or the frequency of pickups?
Is also charged with giving advice and guidance in carrying out the requirements of the use of the drop box and the dissemination of materials and the monitoring of the drop box and whatnot. So, and the state board already has talked about having a program within many of these facilities to start to enfranchise the individuals who are in these facilities. So, I mean, there is an existing program, and this would, again, codify certain existing practices that already are happening. So in this case, it seems to be the state board has gone into a corrections facility and spoken with some of the management there to discuss how these materials need to be collected and how frequently they would have to come in and get them. So if you want to, you could require the regulations that the state board has to adopt to include frequency of collection of materials as it relates to specific election deadlines.
One thing's, I don't want to take a lot of the committee's time. I have a lot of questions, but I can also be quiet and defer.
It's open for discussion and debate. I'm sorry, Senator Gallion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a few questions on this. So this is considered a non-public drop box because the public couldn't go off the street and drop in a ballot if they're not. Is that why it's considered non-public? Great. So, are there any other non-public drop boxes in the state?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay, so if a private organization wanted their own drop box and lobbied for it, I guess this would set a precedent that other potential organizations could get these?
No. It takes statute, and that's why this is before us.
Okay.
Look, these are people who have not been proven guilty. They're being held. And I think the idea of not encouraging other people to have to go through security into the holding station, I think is probably one to reduce their investment in security and bringing people into the jail. I think the hope is they'll go to other drop boxes, and there'll be plenty of drop boxes within a mile, 2 miles, 5 miles, whatever, like we talked about today. So
would this be considered? I get would this be a local bill technically? So I guess often we give local courtesy unless it's precedent setting. So I guess that's why we're talking about it so much, because it would be setting a precedent for other. Yeah. So I get what volume of, and you may not know this, but how many folks are we talking about that this could be helping out in the facility? 100 or 500? I mean, I'm not familiar with the facility.
Can anybody answer that? How many are in the booking or holding facility, Senator?
Actually talking to the department about another bill, and that subject came up. And between this facility and another facility, they're the two biggest. It's about 700
Combined?
combined.
It's over
So the two biggest
So
facilities.
it turns over quite frequently, too. I mean, this is a holding for pretrial. So, I mean, you're talking about a different group that's going in here daily, weekly, monthly, and that's part of the reason. But the individuals in this type of facility don't have the option to use other means of voting. So this was like I said, according to the delegation, this was an opportunity to give individuals who have less options to participate an option to participate.
Okay.
Senator?
Just two quick technical things. The drop boxes, are they provided by the state normally, or is that what the counties do? I mean, because here it's saying the state is going to provide the drop box, and I don't know.
The state orders them. Now, I don't know if they have to reimburse them, but the state
That answers it.
designs them, buys them in whatever numbers they think they need across the state.
Okay, and then the second question is, I'm assuming that these are not all Baltimore City residents. So for the drop box, would only the Baltimore City residents be allowed to put in the drop box?
Absolutely not. Any eligible voter would be able to use the drop box to put their materials in. And that's part of what is the provision in the bill that says the local board of Baltimore City will disseminate the materials to the appropriate entities. So if an individual is from, say, Anne Arundel County in this facility, and they put in an absentee ballot for Anne Arundel County, the local board of Baltimore City would send that material to Anne Arundel. And they already do that, too. So individuals from other counties, say they dropped their ballot in a drop box in Baltimore City, and it turns out it was an Anne Arundel ballot, they send it to the appropriate local board.
Okay, so that's current law, so Anne Arundel could drop it in a Howard County and it would still count?
Yes.
Vice Chair.
Senator Gallion, I just want to clarify that we don't pass laws for locations of drop-off boxes because they do get moved around a lot based on construction or who's in charge of the boards of election or whatever. In general, though, they just have to be authorized by the local boards of elections. This is different, I assume, because it's private.
Just one.
Again, just to clarify, so just a sort of a rhetorical, but I want to make sure. Baltimore Central Booking is not run by Baltimore City government. It's a state facility. Is that correct?
So the Division of Correction runs the Baltimore City Pretrial Complex. The Division of Correction, which houses pretrial detainees and inmates, and all other local jails in the state of Maryland are overseen by the counties. So it looks like the Division of Correction operates this particular facility.
Yeah, so again, just to say, this is a state facility, so it's having the state supporting that and having the state connection is really clear. I just want to be clear, like while it's being put in as a Baltimore City bill, I think that's up for debate, but we are taking it as a responsibility that these are residents in Baltimore City at the time that they're going through booking, but I just wanted to assert that this is a state-run facility, and so I believe that's why it gives us jurisdiction to make special accommodations for those individuals.
Senator Gallion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just kind of following up.
Okay.
So the question was brought up about if it's, if the person in there doesn't live in that district, so say you mentioned Anne Arundel County. So when that's taken out of the drop box, how is that delivered to Anne Arundel County? Through the mail?
But they already do that.
Right.
So this happens across the state now. If one local board of elections receives material from an individual that actually belongs to a different county, they already send that information back to the appropriate county. That's just part of what they do.
Right. So I assume that'd be in the mail. So kind of piggybacking on what Senator Riley brought up kind of early in this discussion, do you really need the drop box? Why not just mail the ballot from central booking, and then I'm assuming the address on that will be wherever it's supposed to go, correct?
Because the materials in the Dropbox aren't all ballots. It's for any election-related material, and only absentee ballots are prepaid postage. So, for example, if you wanted to change your voter registration, or if you wanted to change your party affiliation on some sort of paper application, you would not have prepaid postage. The individual in the facility would have to pay for that themselves to put it in the mail. The Dropbox allows them to put in their election-related mail and have it sent to the appropriate entities without having to pay for those things.
Which would be 50 cents, right?
I don't know. I haven't bought a stamp in a long time.
Okay, if people think it's inappropriate, they can vote against the bill. Okay. Vice Chair.
Thank you. For the legal counsel, I think, unless there's any colleagues who can answer this. So if a person in the booking facility, one of the election-related materials is a voter registration card or a request for an absentee ballot. So let's say the person drops it off at the Baltimore drop-off box and they live in Anne Arundel County. You had mentioned that there's a lot of churn, a lot of turnover. By the time their absentee ballot comes back to them, they could be checked out of the central booking facility and somewhere else. So then what happens?
It's the same for any ballot that's misdelivered. I mean, it just gets sent back to the board or it gets returned as unusable.
Senator,
The point is to enfranchise folks.
right, Senator, but now you might request through an application a ballot and then you move. So it's the same situation. There's no guarantee we can track everybody down. I mean.
I think it's a percentage game. I know that I'm buying a new house. I know that I'm going to be moving. I handle my affairs. I don't know how long I'm going to be in the booking facilities.
Well, you might also be in a rental apartment and be
Sure.
moving and having to force to live with relatives. I mean,
100%.
there's no guarantee. The question is, I think we have to all judge in a cost-benefit situation, does it expand the electorate and give people opportunity, or is it a liability and it's too big a cost? I mean, that's probably true with a lot of the decisions we make. It's a fair question. But just like things from the Dropbox are forwarded now, this is no different. Just like about might go to someone's house, it's not a perfect system, they've moved. So that's what we live with, and we'd make judgments to the best of our ability. There's a request for a hold from the Vice Chair. Let's go to the next bill.
Senate Bill 536, Montgomery County Stormwater Charges, Organizations Offering Agricultural Exhibitions. This bill prohibits Montgomery County from imposing a charge pursuant to a local system of charges for stormwater management on an organization that offers agricultural exhibitions and is exempt from taxation under 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code. There is an amendment it's outside of your packet that actually replaces the amendment in your packet from Senator King. This is amendment number 623022/1. Should be on your desk somewhere. The amendment strikes the language of the bill regarding charges imposed by the county and substitutes language prohibiting a municipality in Montgomery County from imposing stormwater charges on an organization that offers agricultural exhibitions. The amendment also changes the bill's effective date to July 1st and adds a 2-year sunset terminating on June 30th, 2023. Finally, the amendment adds language requiring certain municipalities in Montgomery County to report to the Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs Committee and the House Environment and Transportation Committee by December 31st, 2022 on the status of establishing a stormwater charge for agricultural exhibition organizations that is comparable to charges imposed on similar organizations throughout the state. There is a local letter on this bill. Do you still want to offer yours? Or? Okay. So there's also an amendment in your packet. So that's on page, on page 40 of your packet from Senator Kagan. Senator Kagan's amendment would make the act an emergency bill, and then would also sunset the bill on June 30th, 2023.
Caruso?
Amendment.
Okay, let's, well,
So they are competing amendments, to be clear.
okay.
So Senator King is unaware of your
Senator
amendment?
King is, yes, so if I can speak, Mr. Chairman? Thank you. Okay, so we have a problem and we are struggling to find a solution. The delegation letter is outdated. So let me just say that. That is before any amendments. The delegation letter. So we had a unanimous bill that is now no longer unanimous, and that was before amendments. The Montgomery County Fairgrounds, which is a lovely institution, has been paying roughly $80,000 a year for stormwater, for its share of stormwater fee. It is the only fairgrounds in the entire state. Many of your county fairgrounds pay $0. There's some that pay $1. And this guy is a local nonprofit. And guess what? There was no fair this year. Guess what? There was no fair last year. And so he's really struggling. All of not just the county fair, but all of the rentals are out. So he's been desperate to look for an alternative solution. At the same time, the city of Gaithersburg appreciates $80,000 a year in revenue to help mitigate their stormwater revenues. So Senator King and I and Senator Zucker, the delegation chair, have been talking for the last couple of weeks trying to figure out a middle ground. I came up with a 2-year sunset of they don't have to pay the fee, but then it's done. So 2 years, basically a COVID vacation from the stormwater fee, which puts Gaithersburg in the hole by $160,000, but then it would start up again. The concept, I think it was Senator Riley who asked about this, it would be an emergency bill for FY21, our current fiscal year, that we're mid-COVID, and then FY22 next year, and then they'd be back in 23. Hopefully there's a county fair, lots of revenue, blah, blah.
I'm going to interrupt. Has a delegation adopted your amendment?
We have not adopted any amendments. We have not reconvened. Do you want me to just take it
Yeah,
back and ask for
we're
this?
going to hold it until the
Fine.
delegation works it out.
Fine. Sorry to bring you in our mess.
Okay, Senate Bill 564, Consolidation of the Procurement Improvement Council and the Council for Procurement of Health, Educational, and Social Services. This bill merges the Council for the Procurement of Health, Educational, and Social Services with the Procurement Improvement Council and modifies the Procurement Improvement Council membership. It also expands the Council's authority to include providing a forum for the discussion of the use of eMaryland Marketplace in compliance with the requirement that state and local entities publish notice of procurements or notices of procurement awards on the eMaryland Marketplace website. The bill expresses legislative intent that a business or representative of a business that participates on the council will not be favored or disfavored in or disqualified from state procurement based on participation with the council. There is an amendment in your packet on page 45 from Senator Griffith. This is amendment number 353828/1. The amendment adds language requiring the council to report to the General Assembly on compliance with the requirements regarding the publication of procurement notices on eMaryland Marketplace.
Bills before the committee. What's the wishes of the committee? Is there a motion? It's been moved and seconded. Anybody object to the amendment from the sponsor? Any objections? Seeing none, it is adopted. The bill as amended is now open for discussion. Either people, I assume without discussion, there's no objection. Seeing no lights, no objection, I will mark it as unanimous and sent to the floor. Next bill.
Senate Bill 598, Procurement, Office of Small Minority and Women's Business Affairs, Small Business Reserve Program, and Veteran-Owned Small Business Enterprises Program. This bill repeals the statewide goal that at least 1% of the value of procurement contracts be made to veteran-owned small business enterprises, and instead requires the Special Secretary of the Governor's Office of Small Minority and Women Business Affairs to adopt a statewide goal by regulation. The bill includes various provisions to align management of the Veteran Small Business Enterprise Preference Program with existing preference program management structures and makes conforming changes. Finally, it establishes an advisory committee on veteran small business enterprises within the Governor's Office of Small Minority and Women Business Affairs. There's no amendments in the packet. However, I would note that Senator Carrozza has requested to be added as a co-sponsor.
Okay, first let's get the bill on the floor. It's been moved and seconded. Any objection to the amendment? Don't all raise your hand at once. With no objection, Senator Carrozza's name gets added. The bill as amended, further discussion. Seeing no lights on, I will assume it is unanimous. The bill will pass on to the floor. Next.
Senate Bill 674, Environment, Commission on Environmental Justice and Sustainable Communities, Reform. This bill makes several changes to the Commission on Environmental Justice and Sustainable Communities. The bill, 1, alters the composition of the commission and provisions governing the appointment of members and the delegation of the chair. 2, requires that, to the extent practicable, the membership must reflect racial, gender, ethnic, and geographic diversity of the state. 3, requires the Maryland Department of the Environment to provide new commission members with specified orientation. 4, requires the commission to meet at least 6 times per calendar year as specified. And 5, alters and expands the required duties of the commission. There are no amendments.
A number of the bills on this page are from the Griffith Special Work Group on Justice and Equality. I know this is one of them and a few more. I think Senator West's bill, I think Senator Eckert's a number of these bills, I believe. And I know Senator Patterson and Senator Ellis worked on that committee. Okay, on the Elfrith bill, is it moved? Somebody moved and seconded. Senator Patterson.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. Could you read number 5, expansion of duties again, please? You was going through a list of about 5 points.
So the fifth point is just that it alters and expands the required duties of the commission. So specifically, it adds language requiring them to use data sets and mapping tools to review and analyze the impact of current state laws and policies. It requires them to coordinate with the Commission on on the Maryland Commission on Climate Change. And it requires them to create a list of potential supplemental environmental projects to address environmental justice issues.
Sound like some language I had before. All right, thank you.
And I'm sorry, Ms. Moore.
There were no amendments offered, no.
Senator Carrozza.
And thank you for tying these bills together. As we work through them, though, I noticed that on the one bill, Senate Bill 674, that the Maryland Transportation Builders and Materials Association did oppose it, and then there was a letter from the Maryland Commission on Environmental Justice and Sustainable Communities noting that the additional responsibilities with adequate, and I guess they're only covered by 2 staff members because it's a volunteer organization. And I guess what I was trying to tie together is that the Maryland Transportation Builders and Materials Association said that a lot of this is what's being proposed is already covered by the current Commission on Environmental Justice and Sustainable Communities. So I know a lot of work's been done. And it looks like there's a package of bills, but that we're not doing duplication and that we've looked at them so that the bills all make sense on their own. So that's why I'm raising the question. Maybe if somebody was already involved with the commission, they can, or the task force, they can address that.
Before I call on Senator Fry-Hester and Senator Washington, I can tell you that this commission has been moribund or asleep for about 10 years. And it's been frustrating a lot of people that it hasn't done more. And it's been it hasn't been looked at with any kind of seriousness. And the Secretary of the Environment actually announced to the Climate Commission that they are going to invest time and energy in trying to revitalize it. They have a new staff person working on it. Hopefully that works out. So I think this bill, the work that Senator Ellis and Patterson did with Senator Griffith, maybe Senator Fry-Hester, I don't know, and also the charges that we added in the Climate Solutions Now Act to put some meat on this, to really give them some responsibility going forward, is sort of why this came about. I can't speak to the road builders. I don't know if they're concerned about having to do things they might not want to do. I just don't know. Let me go to Senator Ellis and then Senator Fry-Hester, or the other order, whatever you guys decide.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had the privilege of serving on the Senate President's Work Group for Equity and Inclusion. We met over the summer, into the fall, into the winter, a couple weeks before session started. And this is one of the first issues we took up. And I just want to repeat what the chairman said so accurately, that this commission has been inactive for like 10 years. It's still on the books. They met at the required time. It seems like I would summarize it by drinking coffee and say, why were you here, and looking at a few requests for help and say, can we do this? And then to the next meeting, next quarter, and their annual report over the last few years were a series of collection of minutes like I just described. And believe me, I'm not exaggerating. These are actually in their minutes. And so the Senate President's work group was a bipartisan group. We had members from cities, rural areas, Eastern Shore. I mean, it was really, we took a deep dive, and these recommendations came exactly out of that report to really put the meat back on that bony commission to really look at these issues. Issues affect communities all over Maryland, Eastern Shore, Southern Maryland, Central Maryland, just very comprehensive. And these recommendations were to kind of get that committee to that commission to stand up. And like the chairman mentioned, we have increased commitment from the MDE, Maryland Department of Environment, Secretary Grumbles, to really work with us to do this. So they're expecting this and they incorporate it. And he has taken action on his own also to come in this direction. So this is expected. So I just want to give you that summary of why this legislation came about. You're welcome.
Senator Frey-Hester?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought I heard Senator Patterson mention something about the language, and I couldn't quite hear it. Yeah, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you before. I thought it might be important.
I was trying to get a better analysis in terms of what would the new duties and responsibilities be, as was indicated by staff member on the number 5 amendment, I think it was, new add, whatever it was. But that was my question, because I was waiting for a few more buzzwords, for which I didn't hear, but hopefully we'll get there.
Thank you very much.
Senator Simon Ayer?
Thank you. The way I read the bill, and maybe April can help me on this, it's trying to kickstart this commission by telling them they have to meet certain times. But it also, are these SEPs what they're talking about here? Okay, so, all right, that makes sense.
The bill's before us. Will anybody be voting against it? Seeing not, I will mark this down as unanimous. With this point, we are going to stop.
Yeah. I apologize. I would like to open it for a co-sponsor if it's too late to.
No, that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else want to join Senator Ellis? 3, 4, 5. Well, you can see Frey-Hester, Lamb, Washington, and as well, obviously, Senator Ellis.
Hester and Washington. Anybody else? Okay, good. All right.
Okay, then we will continue on Friday at 9:45. Please be here promptly. And the Education Subcommittee will meet on Monday. 12 to 1. Let's say 3:30. The Education Subcommittee to look at the FAFSA bill. 3:30 on Monday. We'll send out a notice, and I'll remind you on Friday. Okay, I think we've got the rest of this. We have 4 from this list, and we have another.
4 on the next.
The second list. Okay, so we had 4 left, 2 held, and the second list of 4 bills, that's 10, and we're going to have another list generated tomorrow. So we're not stopping at 10. We have another 10 or 15, and I hear cheers coming from the end of that room because we're dealing with some of the compacts. So that's 10. There's going to be another 10 or 12. We'll knock through as many as we can. Okay. 9:45 sharp.
Your mic's on. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.